Here we are in the Mole Valley. I think shortly going to get to the River Mole, are we?
Absolutely.
Shay? So with Shay Donald, who is the National Vice Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales.
Yes.
And slight diversion from the route I've been taking on the Police Friendship tour, in that we're here now in Leatherhead,
Yes.
not far from the Police Federation's
No,
headquarters.
just a short walk away.
So, Shay, Police Federation conference, as we're recording this,
Yes.
is next week. Let's gently walk on here. When I was thinking about what topics we might cover
Yeah.
in this, there's a long list. You know, I not going to avoid saying that the list that I had of things that I was keen to cover with you is
Yeah.
the longest of anybody that I've been walking with on
I think
this
that's
policing
because
friendship tour.
our police officers deal with so much, and we've had so much to deal with in the last 12, 18 months. It doesn't surprise me, really. It doesn't surprise me.
Well, and of course with the pandemic, mental health, which is the first topic,
Yes.
for which you're the Federation's lead,
Yeah.
is something I was keen to cover with you. And in an environment like this, I'm just going to spin the camera around a little. You've suggested that the view is going to get even better
Oh yeah.
as we progress. So, but it's not bad at the moment.
No, it gets better.
Uh,
It gets better.
Part of you looking after your own mental health during
Yes.
the worst of the pandemic, when
Yeah.
you know you've been based at Federation headquarters,
Yeah.
huge amount you and others in the Federation team to do has been to come and do a bit of walking out here, I think.
Well, I think being, as everyone has been, restricted indoors, very little to do, we found exploring your local areas, as many of us have done, there's some fantastic walks that are available, and the one we're going on at the moment is a regular one of mine. I will admit, Bernard, we are doing a bit of a shorter one because of your age. But this is absolutely one way that I find to clear my head, and I'll normally grab someone else from the building to come with, so you have a bit of company, and then just in this kind of environment you're talking, you're de-stressing, you're out somewhere beautiful, and it helps so much, and I don't think we do it enough. I don't think we actually take that time out in our busy lives, and we all have busy lives no matter what, and it just helps so much. And it's not a run, it's a walk, it's relaxing, but it's energizing, and it's so easy for everyone within policing to just feel like you're on a low ebb of energy. So yeah, this is definitely one of the things that I undertake regularly as a boost to my mental health, and it just levels you, it centers you again.
Very important. It's in work in the very broadest sense, not just policing, but the opportunity actually to recharge your batteries during the day is absolutely essential. So mental health, you lead for the Federation on mental health.
Yeah.
Big impact potentially on mental health of police officers.
Yeah.
During the course of the pandemic. So
Yeah.
tell us something about that experience over the past, what is now about a year.
Well, I mean, so firstly, we know that there's a huge issue with complex PTSD within policing anyway, and that's just by the very nature of the job that police officers undertake. So we know that Cambridge University, in collaboration with Police Care UK, did a survey 2 years ago called The Job, The Life, and it's startling results. 20% of police officers are either suffering or have suffered with complex PTSD. That's 1 in 5 police officers, and no surprise, you think of the trauma that they face on a day-to-day basis. Now you couple in the coronavirus and the pandemic, you've got officers regularly attending sudden deaths of people who've died with coronavirus. There's the additional fear of contracting the virus just through your normal undertaking of your duties and responsibilities on a day-to-day basis, and the fear that if you contract it, will you give it to your family? Will you give it to your kids? And then you've got offenders who've been weaponizing COVID. So you had the threat of people either spitting at you or biting you, saying that they are infected with COVID. So this is all played on officers' minds. If any officer says that, oh, I haven't been bothered by COVID, you know, I'd be surprised to find one. Everyone's had that fear. Mothers have had that fear of sons and daughters. Husbands have had that fear of wives, and vice versa, partners. It's all around us. Every time we've turned on the TV, through the first wave or the second wave, all we've seen is death tolls and how many people are dying, and we've lost family members. I've lost friends. I know friends who've lost parents, other relatives due to this virus, which is absolutely indiscriminate. And that plays on a police officer's mind.
And also the uncertainty of some of the legislation, the rules, the guidance.
Well, that's just complicated issues.
Further complicates matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in situations before where the Home Office have announced, well, these are going to be the new coronavirus restrictions or the new legislation in relation to coronavirus. And if we're getting it moments before it's announced, officers are getting it moments. Literally, you get a phone call and you get told, oh, by the way, these are going to be the new measures that are going to be implemented. And that's on the times we do find out.
So you get something at 5 to 12 and it's announced at 12 o'clock.
Exactly.
Is that an exaggeration on my part?
No, it's not. And often we get stuff that's announced where we haven't been informed about it. So, you know, boots on the ground have got to interpret this, and here we are telling people, you know, we're members of the public who, like us today, could be out for a walk. Well, in the height of the coronavirus pandemic, we would have been stopped and questioned, why are we out walking? And that's not a normal role that police officers undertake. You know, we run the risk here of alienating that extremely good relationship and bond that exists between the police and the public by being pawns in this process in policing these coronavirus restrictions. And another point that I left out, talking about fears that police officers have had, is vaccinations. You know, we've lobbied really hard for government to deviate from the JCVI guidance about vaccinations by way of occupation, purely because the fact police officers are super spreaders, and also, you know, we can't police our job within socially distanced guidance or application of putting hands on someone. So it was a common sense approach for us to say, give police officers the vaccination, because, as I said, all that fear and apprehension that's going through police officers' minds every single day when they either meeting with family members or going home to their families or their loved ones would be mitigated by having a vaccination. But, you know, we've ended up in a position where government have stuck by the JCVI guidance with regards to comorbidity factors and rollout due to age once the top categories had been listed.
Despite Federation best efforts.
Despite it. And, you know, I will give the Home Secretary due in the fact that she had lobbied for us, but ultimately it was a decision by Cabinet.
Yes.
And Cabinet have said, we are going to stick with the JCVI guidance, and that was it.
Okay. I'd like to step back from the mental health and the tie-in that it has inevitably with pandemic through to the conference that you have as we're walking next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. I think I'm right in saying it's the first virtual conference that the Police Federation, national conference that the Police Federation will have run, although did you do a virtual conference last year?
No, we did. It was probably something called a conference light. It wasn't clearly a conference. We met solely for the purpose of discussing member subscriptions,
okay,
and voting on whether we increase subscriptions or not, but it wasn't conference in the format as we know.
So it's essential business matters,
Yes.
if I can put it like that,
Pretty much.
rather than the opportunity to debate some of the still essential but issues of the day, which
Yeah.
you will have an opportunity to do this coming week. Which of those topics that are coming up in the conference next week would you draw particular attention to?
Well, I mean, the theme for conference this year is policing under pressure. And I mean, that probably describes how policing has been over the last 18 months. I'm not saying policing hasn't been under pressure prior to that, but we've, you know, what we've done in the last 18 months has never been faced by any police officer before. So this has caused creaking and straining everywhere within policing. And then we've looked at other areas that are incorporated within that, policing of protests. So we can have a session on that. That's been very vocal because in one hand we're trying to enforce the legislation around coronavirus, but while also respecting the right to lawful protest, and that's caused problems. You know, it's caused problems, and more so it's been highlighted in the media, where officers have often got the wrong end of the stick in relation to the way the media have broadcasted our policing of those protests. So we've got another session in there called Trial by Media, which I think is probably...
They'll all be fascinating, I'm sure, but I will be particularly fascinated in the trial by media.
Yeah.
There, in that, you know, clearly Policing Insight is part of the media, albeit in a specialist way. Equally, I can absolutely see that there would be frustration on the part of officers, staff, even those more broadly in policing, even the wider public, that the media might tend to pick up on what I'll call the bad news stories.
Well, you know, this is the problem with social media. Things go viral, and you never get the full picture in a 10-second clip, and that's what we've seen. That's what we see more and more of. We see officers being judged on 10-second actions. Hello, where are you from?
Here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Looks a lovely spot down there.
It is lovely, I've been here.
Hello, you. Are you happy? You had a nice run in the water. You're all cool now. Yes.
Nice and clean as well.
Yeah.
So officers and policing more widely are affected by the interpretation, the focus that there is on more newsworthy. Those elements judged more newsworthy.
Absolutely. I mean, a really good example is the Sarah Everard vigil. I mean, obviously, absolute tragedy with what happened to Sarah Everard, and I can't even begin to understand or express the degree of sympathy that's required to her family and friends over her loss. And what started off as a vigil, for all good intents and purposes, was hijacked by an element that was anti-police. Yet we know that the following morning, everything on the news was about how police were heavy-handed. Yet I was on social media that evening, and I could see a totally different story of what was being portrayed on social media. So that's absolutely frustrating. It's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for police officers who are involved in that protest and similar protests. I mean, there was a female sergeant who was part of that event, who was basically being told she's a disgrace to her sex. I mean, some of the comments that were coming out and the treatment of police by this small element who was keen to disrupt what was a peaceful event was atrocious, and mainstream media just jumped on the news pieces that would sell newspapers or create clickbait articles.
I'm interested in whether there are ways of mitigating that, you know, how to deal with that for the future. But I just, before moving on to that, want to remark on, just in the past couple of days, there was a television programme that related to stop and search.
Yes.
My understanding was that although the police, I think the Met, were keen to offer a contribution to that, that contribution wasn't taken up. So there must be many an occasion when, whether it's on stop and search or indeed in other cases as we've just been discussing, the Federation is keen to express a view,
Well, we
but
do.
simply don't get the opportunity, given the opportunity.
No, I mean, I have to be honest with you. I've lost track of the number of times I've given either radio or television interviews just on the subject of stop search, and because my reasoning and my response was logical and cohesive, it didn't fit their narrative, so it was never put on air. And this is the problem we have with things like stop search, is there's, firstly, there's a huge disparity in the weight of stop search figures that is attributed to the Metropolitan Police area. It's also the one area that's got the largest diversity of people living within it. So when you start looking at, well, if you're black, you're 8 times more likely to be stopped, you have to take that figure out of a number of other factors, associated with the stop search figures nationally. And when you want to explain it and go through it systematically, logically, with evidence, no one wants to listen to it because it's not sensational enough. It's much easier to target the police as institutionally racist, or saying that you're using an archaic power that shouldn't be given to you. But we know that it's effective. I'm not saying that stop search is a panacea for policing, but it's certainly a tool in the toolbox, and when used correctly can make significant impacts on public safety and reducing crime, especially violent crime. You can't have it both ways. You can't have people being stabbed and then saying, well, we're not going to do stop search. Well, people are carrying knives and they're stabbing people. How are we going to find them unless we introduce stop search in areas where that violence is more prevalent, or the risk of being stabbed is more prevalent? And no police officer that I'm aware of goes out and starts his shift and goes, well, that's a green man, I'm going to stop green men today. They're going to stop people that fit a narrative in relation to intelligence within that area, and if they're acting furtively or suspiciously. And then everything these days is also recorded on body-worn video. We don't get stop searches where there's absolute disproportionate power that's being used in relation to the formation of the grounds for that search or the execution of that search. But that never gets out in the media. We only get the big headline figures, and that, officers do not want to be labelled as racist, particularly when they're not.
One of the areas there, so body-worn video has come in reasonably extensively over the last handful of years. I see that Police Scotland is looking to increase the body-worn video available to officers. So from a policing perspective, it seems to have been a success, reducing the number of incidents, helping to diffuse situations when both parties are aware that it's being used. But should its use be even more widespread than it currently is?
I'm not quite sure what the situation is in Scotland and how widespread it is used.
Of course, your sister organisation, the Scottish Police Federation, has responsibility.
Exactly, but I would say that in England and Wales, most frontline police officers have possession of body-worn video, and you start your shift, you take it out, you keep it on. So most incidents where there's an interaction with the police is being recorded regardless. And especially for high harm offences such as domestic violence incidents, its worth is proven to be invaluable, particularly where victims don't want to seek prosecution against their partners. But
what about those incidents though where the police forces will have the body-worn video evidence showing a particular incident, social media partial clips of the incident are
and this is about the ability to release that to show the full incident. It's difficult. We've certainly taken a stance that where there's a short clip that's been placed on social media which doesn't actually accurately portray the full circumstances of the incident, we should release it as soon as possible. The complicating factors in this is that if that incident is then subject to an investigation, we've got to protect all parties involved, whether that's the person making the complaint or the officer being complained of. And we also need to be certain that that body-worn video doesn't disadvantage either of them. So I would say that yes, we should release it, but we should release it at the most available opportunity where it won't impact any investigation or potential complaint for any of the individuals involved. But it's a difficult balancing act.
Yeah, the balance is key there, and judging that. One of the suggestions, indeed arguments, that ties in with Stop Search to some degree is that policing isn't as diverse a profession yet that it could be. It doesn't represent. It's not a representative body in comparison with the local community.
Yeah.
So the local community would be different in, let's say, the Met compared to, let's say, Cumbria or Dyfed-Powys. So there have been steps, certainly in my time involved in policing, so 30 odd years, for policing to become more diverse. So
yeah.
There's some suggestion that in a similar way to when the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the RUC,
Yeah.
in Northern Ireland, became Police Service for Northern Ireland, PSNI, that there be some focus on recruiting communities not well represented in policing at that time. So in the PSNI, it was which was a heavily Protestant group of police officers, that there were efforts made to increase the proportion of Catholics, and
Yep.
quite successful, I believe, steps taken to do that. There's been comment recently in the papers about policing leaders suggesting that there be similar, I'm going to call it may not be quite the right term, but positive discrimination.
No, I think you've probably hit the nail right on the head there with describing what it is. And I don't think it's just police leaders. I think the National Black Police Association has also called for the time is now for positive discrimination. The problem I have with taking that path is that positive discrimination is currently illegal. You know, it does not complacent with the Equality Act. If you were to introduce it, regardless of how positive your intentions were, you would potentially be subject to a lawsuit, because the law has not been changed to incorporate that. Is it the answer? I don't think so. I think we've got to take positive action and use it more effectively. Bernard, I've been in policing now for coming up to 20 years. This whole argument around increasing diversity in policing has been with me throughout my career. I'm a black and ethnic minority officer, I'm a mixed race officer, so I've been part of that discussion. I've fed into it. And you know what? Everything that I've seen is just reinventing the wheel. That's all that I do see. I haven't seen any real initiative that's struck up that has had wholesale buy-in from the community. And if I'm brutally honest, if we look at the starting salaries of police officers, is that an attractive enticement to bring in people from all diverse areas of the community? I don't think it is. I don't think we pay our cops enough to start, and it's not an attractive enough profession yet to increase that demand. Could we do more? Yes. Should we do more? Yes. I mean, as a federation, we're certainly looking in our election cycle that we're involved in now to increase diversity across the piece, you know, through all protected characteristics. Similarly, the way the police force wants to be reflective of the communities they serve, we as the Police Federation want to be reflective of the police that are our members. But it's a difficult question, and if I had the answer, I'd probably retire a lot sooner.
Well,
honest.
if you had the answer, I'm sure that you would have already been giving it to others, and indeed would have mentioned it here. You mentioned the salary,
Yeah.
and the package that police officers are on, and I'd like to tie this with the expectations of new recruits,
Right.
whether it be that they embark on a policing qualification or not. So the package and the expectations of police officers, and indeed the wider ability to retain them.
If we cross over
Just crossing
here,
a road here.
we just need
we'll
to
just-
get on the other side of the river mole.
Okay, so why don't we do that, and then we'll come to, so that we're heading to the other side of the
Yep.
of the mole, are we? And a chance to just take in the view. And look, the lights here have lots sort of tea cozy type effects on them.
Yeah, there's a local art society who did this recently, and they've got little art exhibitions around the town. And there's this one lady who's part of that art society who did the crocheting.
Yeah.
And posted them on the lamppost. And
So we just need to make sure we don't get
run over.
run over here. I was saying to you beforehand, before we started this, that there have been other hazards on this
They
walk.
have. Oh yes, you spoke about cows.
I did.
particular.
No evidence of cows so far, or indeed, less so the cows, but more the evidence they'd been there recently. We'll just draw a discreet veil over that. And,
No, that's fine.
So,
And we're just going to be taking, just at the end of this brick path,
okay.
we'll go left with these.
It's
people.
fortunately a fairly quiet bridge, that.
Yeah.
There is something else coming up behind
we'll
us
be-
now, I think, so I think we're all right now. So back to the
You were talking about
salary,
the education
requirements, the expectations of new recruits, and indeed the ability. So there's quite a lot in this question.
Yeah.
The ability to hang on to
So the
the
retention
long
issues.
service, the retention
Right.
issue, not just of those who've recently started, but you know the 15, 20, even 25 year experienced officers who are there really to, amongst other things, to make sure that the new intake are brought up to speed. You know, all that experience
Well,
hopefully passed on to those who are new in post.
well, you'd like to think so. I mean, that's quite a complex question that I've got to try and
There's a whole
unpackage
bunch
there.
of stuff there, and
So let me start on let me try and pick out the first pieces. So let's start with this degree entry qualification.
okay, and I'm going to move you to the other side simply because the fence is on this side, and just keen to have an attractive backdrop. Carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
there.
no, it's fine. So we've got this new 3-year qualification. So probation is our probation is for 3 years as opposed to 2, and then you've also got the ability to join with a pre-existing degree. Now, it's not all about degrees. You know, I joined where you did 6 months training, and half of that was you did your initial weeks at a training facility. I went to Ashford, and then you did, you know, time on with the tutor unit, time on with the section, and now what I am hearing is that through this new process, officers aren't getting the protected time that they should be getting, and we focus too hard on ensuring that they meet the qualification for a degree than meeting the proficiencies in performing the role. And that creates trouble. It creates trouble for the force that's hired them, but it also creates trouble for the officer who's performing the job. And then you very soon and easily become disillusioned in the role that you expected to undertake. So that affects your retention issues. We've got retention issues currently for officers who are already in the service, because with pay freezes, with changes to pensions, a lot of them have thought, well, I'm still young, I can still leave, and I can find alternative employment in the private sector, and I'll probably be happier. I won't have to work shifts. I won't have to be a slave to my phone, or always miss my child's birthday party. I can have some sort of regularity in my life. And whereas before people always viewed policing as, oh, it's the career, it's the job, you're doing 30 years now, and that's it. It's all changed. You know, officers are now looking at upwards of 40 years and up for an average police career. And we touched on this conversation really, really early on about the amount of trauma that officers experience in their career, the impact of mental health within policing. I'm going to struggle to find officers who last the full 40 years. I really, really do. So I think there are major retention issues ahead for policing. It's certainly borne out in the figures produced by the Home Office on the workforce data. But we're also seeing this influx, this 20,000 uplift for new police officers. Their retention issues are not as great. I mean, we're looking to recruit in excess of, I think it's 47,000 police officers to retain 20,000 cops. That's a massive amount of police officers. You can't flick a switch and have police officers sign up today and on the street tomorrow. There's a process to be involved in that.
There's a very substantial training and experience in conveying that experience of the longer service to the new service, and also what you do, what opportunities are provided for those who have got, let's say, 30 of their expected 40 years service in, where there's only I look back. You know, I'm not the youngest. I've now been in policing, not as a police officer, but for 31 years.
Yep.
Just into my 60s. And you know, if I had joined at 30, there is no way that I'd be involved in the roughy-tufty of. Or indeed, you wouldn't want me as a response driver. You know, my reaction speed isn't the same as it was back in my 30s. So there are certain very key policing activities that depend on having
fit, able-bodied.
You can be fit and able-bodied in your 40s.
Well, you can. I mean,
but it's not the same
Bernard, I'm in my 40s, and my late 40s. I've got about a year left before I hit 50. I'm fairly active. I mean, I play cricket, and I have to say, I was at cricket practice yesterday. I'm aching today. Yeah, and that's cricket practice. Now, you take a 50-year-old who's been out rafting and tumbling on a Friday and Saturday night, you know, it wears on your bones. You know, injuries take longer to heal, and you will find officers, unfortunately, looking at an ill health retirement because they can't fulfill that role anymore through no fault of their own. They've just been doing it continuously for that length of time that it's had a negative impact on their body. There's only so much you can cope with. But it does ask an interesting question, you know. We're opening up the roles to, we talked about diversity. Well, how much diversity do we want to introduce into policing? Disability is part of that spectrum. Are we going to start looking at recruiting police officers for potentially disabled roles where they maybe don't need to fulfill the actions of a able-bodied officer but can perform something else? Or revisiting that discussion about more police staff roles being made available to police officers who have to potentially retire.
This is such a complex area. It sort of makes me think of, you know, the direct recruitment into the detective area.
Yes.
For example, it makes me think of some very able individuals who I know who are PCSOs, who couldn't become a police officer because of the challenges of the fitness exam. They are capable of discharging their PCSO responsibilities.
But I need to stop for a minute. This is one of the loveliest spots in the summer, and we've got some kids here now, but you can normally find them playing all over here in the summer. It's absolutely stunning, and there's a manor house over there. We'll walk around the corner now and take you through the onto the Surrey Downs next.
Well,
but,
we're not going to solve on this walk the many challenges, even the challenges that relate to recruitment and retention. But I know that those are topics, many of the topics that we've covered so far,
Yeah.
and we'll go on a little longer just in a moment or two.
That's fine.
Will be covered in the Federation's conference coming up. The bit that I'd just like to return to now, though, is the mental health side.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've made a point of doing on the Policing Friendship Tour, so walking today with you, but also with others in the widest sense involved in policing in the ground that I've so far been able to cover, has been to ask them to nominate a charity
Yeah.
dear to their heart. Now, we were talking a little earlier on, and you suggested that there might be more than one. To which I said, to you, Shay, Shay, do you know that?
Oh, we just need to move
Well,
over.
we've just got a car coming, so we'll let the car head past. To which I said to you, you gave such a fantastic argument in favour of each one of the charities. So let me sort of put the ball in your court, if I may, as we're just
Right,
heading up here. Just replay that conversation that we had a little earlier.
Oh, that's why I'd selected the charities, and
Yes.
or how I'd come to my decision.
How you
on the
come to
charity.
your thinking
Right, okay.
on the charities.
So, I came up with 3 charities. Well, when we first started talking to each other, we're just going to follow this road here, and then we're going to head a left. When we first started talking about this walk and the friendship tour, in my haste, and you did mention, we talk about a charity. I went, oh, I know which charity I'm going to go for, and then further application of reading the email said police charity, and I went, oh, I have to change that. And then I came up with another one after our conversation this morning before we started walking. So in a nutshell, we've spoken so much about coronavirus, and let's be honest, everyone's been affected by coronavirus. Is it down here? No, we keep going, sorry. Everyone's been affected by coronavirus these past 18 months, and there's just been darkness. There's just been real terrible stories. People have lost family members, people have become ill themselves. It really hasn't had much joy or cheer that's come from it. I was one of those few individuals that actually got some positive out of the coronavirus. So what a lot of people probably don't know about me is, well, they might know that I'm South African after listening to this, but I moved to England in 2000. All my family, brothers, sisters, mum and dad are still in South Africa, and I've got a brother, my real closest brother, who went through a real bad patch. Probably started about 10 years ago. Got involved with using drugs recreationally, and then recreational use became addiction more than anything else, which you wouldn't wish on anyone. And it didn't really become apparent to myself, because I had moved to England, but my brother had a breakdown, partly attributed to drugs and hallucinations. He now suffers with schizophrenia because of his prolonged drug use. So I got a phone call one night from my mum, who informed me that she'd been chased down the road. Along with my sister by my brother with a knife, because he'd heard birds telling him that he needed to kill him, and that's what he went to go and do, and was subsequently arrested by police, placed into a psychiatric ward, and I was notified on the Friday, and flew out on the Saturday to go and see them. And I arrived tried to go and speak to my brother. He wasn't in a state. I mean, I'd last seen him 2 years previously. I didn't think that, I mean, I didn't pick up 2 years previous to that he was abusing drugs. But the person that I saw then was completely different to the person that I knew and loved. Tried to get him to go to some rehab, tried to book him into a rehab clinic. He wasn't prepared to do it, and with these things, you know, if you've ever had a family member who's been addicted to drugs, until they're ready to give up drugs and seek rehabilitation, it's not going to happen. So I tried what I could do in that short stay that I was there. I was there 2 weeks, and I came back home, and I felt hopeless, really, and I blamed myself because I felt that because my brother and myself were so close, if I was there, could I have prevented this? Could I have stopped? Could I have noticed? Could I have intervened? And he wouldn't be in this situation. And I carried that guilt around me for a while, and it ate me up inside. It ate me up from a personal level. It impacted on my relationship with my daughter, with my wife, and so much so that I broke down and needed to take a time out from work, and I was booked off with depression, medicated and off for just over 6 months. I'm one of the lucky ones in the sense that the talking therapies that I went on, the medication that I took, the process that I went through to resolve my inner turmoil happened relatively quickly, and there's officers who've gone through this, or people who've gone through this, that aren't that lucky, and their issues carry on far longer. And I won't lie, I think once you get depression, you always have that habit of a dark cloud coming over, but you know how to prevent it from sinking in. But the long story short is my brother deteriorated and ended up homeless, and was homeless for 8 years, up until last Christmas. And there's a gentleman, Carlos Mesquite, who lives in Cape Town. He's an ex-homeless individual himself, ex-drug user, set up a charity to bring homeless people in off the streets. And I have to say, the homeless situation in South Africa is far worse than anywhere else. I mean, in a bid to clear homelessness people off the streets, the police were actually putting them in cages. You know, they had to send in human rights observers because of the atrocities that were being shown against homeless people. It's a totally different world. And he got funding, set up a charitable house. My brother was one of those people who went through that system and program. He's now clean. He's hasn't used in over a year. He's back to his art. He's now selling artwork and getting commissioned to do artwork, and he's helping others who are homeless as well. And Carlos's home, the first 20 people he brought in that were homeless, within 2 months all those 20 people were out working. So they found jobs, they were contributing back into society, and he's just looking to make that bigger and bigger now. There's only so many homeless people you can help, but his heart is in the right place, and he wants to make that as big as possible. So I started my own fundraiser for his charity, which is called SHAC, Strandfontein Homeless Action Committee. And I did that on Facebook, and I raised just over £1,500 for him. And I was really, really proud of that, and that was my kind of thank you for what he'd done to my brother, and to help him help other people like my brother. So that was really, really close to my heart as my original charity.
And I'd be delighted for the Policing Friendship Tour to support that as best we can. So that's one of the three, and there's a very personal story in there, which the story, the account there goes from the darkest times for you and for your family, to times now that are heading it more positively, and what sounds to be a great charity there in South Africa that is supporting homeless.
Absolutely. And I suppose that leads me on to how I came up with the other two. So I did feel that, you know, if people want to try to support something closer to home, you know, something, a charity called Shelter, which helps homeless people within England, would be something fantastic. And I have to admit, I had a fairly biased view of homelessness, particularly as a police officer. You know, I probably looked at them as people who were just drug addicts or criminals, because it tended to be a lot of the petty crime that I dealt with as a young constable were normally committed by people who were from no fixed abode. And having seen what it's, you know, my brother's gone through this process, it just makes you realise that there's a story behind everyone's circumstances, and we're very easy to prejudge, and we're very easy to look and turn our noses down at someone who's begging for money or something else. But there's a story and there's a person behind it all. And I think sometimes as a society, what we do is we look down at these individuals and treat them or view them as less than society, less than human, and we shouldn't. We need to take that time to reflect, and if there's somebody out there who can help them, who can get them into a better place, they want nothing more than to be back, to be being productive members of society. So Shelter was my
Shelter's the second. Just before you come on to your third, I'm just going to remark there that actually your comment there about the homeless, even the homeless, if I can put it that way, they have their own individual stories. Even those in policing have their own individual stories. They're not, and perhaps we'll come on to this after you've mentioned the third. But it does tie in with some of the hopes I have for the Policing Friendship Tour. But let's cover your third.
Right. My third is very, very easy one. I've been an absolute champion for mental health, and especially mental health in policing and police officers, and them having the supports in place to ensure that they function with good mental health, not bad. And because I've experienced poor mental health myself, I mean, I've gone through that process. I can understand it, I can empathise with it. I've been through it. Police Care UK, absolutely brilliant work that they're doing in firstly highlighting the issues around mental health within policing. A fantastic charity that looks after not only serving but retired police officers and staff, and they continue to provide services and support for officers when they need it most. Lucky for me, I didn't need to use Police Care, but I've directed a number of officers to Police Care, and all the feedback that I've got is that what they've provided by way of assistance, help and treatment has been absolutely spot on. And for any charity that's doing that, helping officers, especially in light of the fact that officers are taking their lives more and more frequently, that's close to my heart.
A wonderful charity, that third one that I know well, and delighted to have the three that you've mentioned on the list that the Policing Friendship Tour encourages contributions to. Part of the ambition, if I can put it that way, for this largely walking tour that I've embarked on is to draw attention to policing, police officers not just being out of a single mould, if I can describe it that way. That, you know, each police officer, indeed each member of police staff, and those whether specials or working in suppliers, working in academia related to policing, we are each one of us individuals, and it's very often easy to assume that we know individuals' backstory just by looking at them or speaking with them, perhaps on a work basis for a short time. But one of the things that's become increasingly apparent to me on these conversations I've been having with those involved in policing is that we are all, forgive the cliche here, but we are all individuals, and actually policing itself is made up of individuals, for which the speaking on, you go through first. I'll catch up with you. My 30 years, never as a police officer, but working on quite a wide range of policing related matters here in the UK, that I think I've yet to meet a police officer or member of police staff or special or indeed those in wider suppliers and academia and third sector and victim support, and the list can go on and on and on, who at the heart of their engagement, there's a public service ethos. We all need to make sure that we've got bread on the table and more, and that we look after our families and loved ones where we can. We have a roof over our head, but there is a strong public service ethos in policing, and long may that continue to be the case. So whilst a salary and benefits are relevant, 99.9% of those in policing, absolutely their heart is in the right place, and that so rarely comes across when the focus so often is on, dare I say, the bad apple.
Unfortunately, you look at policing in England and Wales, looking at over 130,000 police officers, from constable to chief inspector. You take any number of society that large, or any organisation that large, you're going to find bad apples in any organisation, and with a bad apple, you get rid of them.
You've got to root them out.
You've got to root them out. You've got to get rid of them, otherwise they spoil other apples.
Sadly, you can't ever stop the bad apple. Or it may be a good apple that enters the barrel, if I can use that.
Yeah, but you don't throw the whole barrel away because of one bad apple.
Absolutely.
And this is the thing. I mean, at the heart of it, police officers are there because they do a very, very selfless and thankless task a lot of the time. You think of what is the one job that people go to. Our members, police officers, go to people normally at the worst point in their lives, after they've had their house burgled, or they've been assaulted, or God forbid they've been raped. We don't treat people as customers in the normal sense of the word. We go to them at potentially the lowest points in their lives,
and they come to you, and you want them to come to you.
Absolutely. And we want to help, and we want to provide a service that we can be proud of. We want to prosecute offenders, catch offenders, and prevent crime. I mean, that goes without saying.
And the vulnerable open to coming to the police and not fearing for repercussions, that there might be something in their own backstory that they're fearful of, that might get focused on, rather than the more challenging matter. So
absolutely. And the thing for me is, that's how I saw it when I was frontline, when I was policing. But the more I did that, the more I saw colleagues of mine who were struggling.
Yes.
And I found that the Police Federation was something that I could utilise to help those who help others.
Yes.
And that ethos I still hold true to today. So as the vice chair of the organisation, I still wake up every morning with the mindset that we need to exist to help those officers out there that are helping others. And I'll continue to have that mindset. Nothing's going to change that.
Well, that's shape. We've walked through the Surrey countryside. We're in the Mole Valley as a train. There's a few cows just disappearing behind that tree. I think that's a good point at which, let's just, as that train disappears, we no longer have the river, we have the cows disappearing, we have the slight hum of the traffic in the background, but just down here, in fact, there is the River Mole. Thank you, Shay. It's been an absolute pleasure walking with you. In normal times, we'll shake hands and we'll disinfect afterwards. Good luck with the conference next week, and I look forward to hearing the outcome and observing some of the elements on that. But
definitely,
real pleasure walking. Thank you so much. And now to head back to Police Federation as we're joined by a friend.
Alright, get the ball then.